All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are here for a informational session and a public hearing for a proposed air permit for Michigan Potash Operating LLC tonight. Appreciate everybody coming in. I know there's probably other things that you'd be rather doing tonight, but we do appreciate the time that you are taking out of your evening tonight to join us. My name is Jennifer Dixon, and I work with our Environmental Support Division here at the Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. And I'm going to be moderating the meeting tonight. So we have a pretty full agenda and we'll try to get through it pretty quickly, but I do want to let you know how things are going to operate. And I want to make sure that you get introduced right away to Marianne Dolahanty, who is the decision maker on this permit. She's also our Air Quality Division Director, and I know she wants to give you all a real quick welcome. So Marianne, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay, thanks, Jen. I appreciate that. And I would first like to thank all of you for taking the time out of your evening to participate in our informational session and public hearing on the request by Michigan Potash. Tonight's our opportunity for us to hear from you regarding the draft permit that we've made available for public review. So we're here to listen and to take your comments. Public participation, excuse me, I've been struggling with laryngitis for a while. Public participation is very important to us. It's a vital element of our mission to protect public health and the environment. It creates avenues for conversation, and we do hope that we hear your questions and comments on the draft permit that, again, we made available for public review. We appreciate your flexibility in participating with us virtually. We learned a lot over this last year and a half regarding what it means to be flexible, what it means to consider outreach and communication in these challenging times, always looking for ways to improve what we're doing and how we're reaching you and how we're not reaching you. So we welcome your feedback as well on our process. As a decision maker for the proposed permit, I take every comment very seriously. I want you to know that all comments, no matter how they come to us, whether they come tonight at the public hearing, whether you've mailed in comments to us, made comments by phoning to our public comment voice mailbox, I review all of those, and our staff review all of those prior to making a final decision on the application. So I know many of you have questions and you do want to speak this evening. So know that I'll be listening in, and you'll see me again later in the evening during the hearing portion of the night. And again, thank you for your attention and thank you for joining us. And at this time, Jen, I will turn things back over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Marianne. I'm kind of glad tonight that you don't have to do a lot of speaking, because it's still a little bit challenging there. So we'll let our panelists, I'm going to have my other staff that's with us tonight go ahead and turn their cameras on so we can just do a really quick introduction. I know it says introduction of Air Quality Division staff, but we're actually lucky enough to have a couple other divisions represented here tonight in case we get questions that they might be able to assist us with. So first I'm going to introduce Andy Drury, and he is the air permit engineer for this project. So you're going to be mostly hearing from Andy tonight. He's going to give the presentation on the proposed permit. So kind of walk you through a little bit about what Air Quality Division does, the purpose of this, that we're here tonight, you know, where we are in the process, that kind of thing. And then he'll also participate on our panel when we do our question and answer session. So I have a couple other people. Really quickly, I do want to make sure that I mention Matt Tomlinson. He's my coworker and he's going to be co-hosting with me tonight. So you might see his name there. He's helping me in the background with some other things. So a couple other Air Quality Division staff that I have here tonight is Mike Deppa. He's our toxicologist. So he'll be able to answer questions regarding some toxic stuff if folks have questions on that. I have Stephanie Hanksbaugh. She is our air modeler. So she talks about and can answer questions about computer models that are used to look at what potential impacts from pollutants might be. I also have Amy Robinson. She's representing, excuse me, our air monitoring unit. So monitoring and modeling, they kind of sound the same, but they're very different. The air monitors are going to be stationary measuring devices that are scattered around the state and in a area or a thing that we call a network. And so she'll be able to answer questions about what air monitors are closest to the proposed facility and what they measure for if folks are interested in that. I also have Karen Owens, which we're really lucky to have. She would be the inspector for the facility, and she's does inspections of a lot of facilities around the area, so she's very familiar with that as well. So We're lucky to have her too. I also have James Milne, and he is from our Water Resources Division, and Mark Snow from our Office of Oil, Gas, and Minerals. So really lucky to have all those folks with us tonight. If you all want to go turn your cameras off, except Andy, you leave yours on because I know you're going to be giving your presentation here really quickly. I just have a few other housekeeping things to go through. But Andy, I did want to mention to you, just so that you know, we do have quite a few folks that have called in tonight. So when you're giving your presentation, just please keep that in mind. We want to make sure that we're doing our best to communicate with folks on the phone, even though we are showing a visual presentation. We can share that on the website afterwards if we want to, if folks would find that productive. You can also contact Andy, and we'll give his email address and phone number out a little bit later. If you're interested in seeing the slides, we can email them to you or get them to you in some other way. So after we do the little bit of a presentation kind of layout, like I said, air quality division and this proposed project, we will get to the question and answer session. This proposed project is a little bit complicated and is something that maybe we aren't really used to seeing as the general public. I know I certainly wasn't. So if I see questions about things that we've been talking about, or if there's some clarification needed, we might be able to stop for a minute, let Andy get a drink and ask a couple questions there or something. So after we're done with the question and answer session, or 7 o'clock, whatever comes first, so we'll start the public hearing. So during the question and answer session, we'll be able to respond to your questions, try to give you as much information as we can. But once we start that hearing, like I said, after the Q&A is done, you guys don't have any more questions, or at 7 o'clock, whichever one comes first, then we won't be responding to your comments. That's going to be your opportunity to put comments on the record. Like Marianne said, we have tons of other ways to submit comments. If you aren't comfortable or ready to make a comment tonight, you certainly do not have to. There's plenty of time. The comment period closes, I believe, on October 18th. So you'll still have time to send us email comments if you want, send us voicemail comments if you want, maybe even time to put some in the mail if you want. And like Marianne indicated as well, we take all of those comments very seriously and we weigh them all the same. You don't have to be at a hearing to make a comment to be considered on the record. Also talk really quickly about where you can find other information about this proposed project and who, like I said, to contact if you have further questions. What I'll probably do is just verbally share Andy's information. And then Andy, if you don't mind being a touch point for some folks, if they have questions that you can't answer, I'd appreciate that. So if folks on the phone want to have a pencil and piece of paper handy, I think that would be really beneficial. All right, a couple other things, and then I promise I'll pass it over to Andy and I'll stop talking. I want to let you know that all of your lines will be muted during the evening tonight, unless you're going to be asking a question, and at that time I will unmute your line for you. We are going to be recording this meeting as well. So what we do with those, if you are unfamiliar, is we will record the meeting and then we post it on our YouTube channel, which, if you're familiar with YouTube, is just at Michigan Eagle. And those, usually when they're initially posted, which might be tomorrow or maybe Monday, I would say at the latest, it won't have closed captions that are like accurate, but we do send those out to be closed captioned appropriately. So if you know anybody with English as a second language, or someone who needs to be reading those closed captions to be able to actually hear what's going on, someone who's hearing impaired, you might want to just wait a couple of days to view that recording, but it should be available relatively soon. Then the most important thing is, how can you ask a question? And this goes the same for making a comment. What you're going to want to do is you can go ahead and type your question into that question and answer box at the bottom. Not everybody is comfortable verbalizing their question. That's perfectly acceptable. We love it when people type their questions in. That just helps us get ready to answer appropriately for you. And then you can also just click that raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen, and that will raise your hand and I'll be able to unmute you. So this is going to be particularly important if you want to make a verbal comment tonight. You're going to want to utilize that. Folks on the phone, if you have questions or you would like to make a comment, also perfectly acceptable, and we'll be able to unmute you as well. All you're going to want to remember to do is type #2 into your phone. That will raise your hand on my end so that I can see that you'd like to make a comment or ask a question. I'll go over this again later because I know this was a lot of information to throw at folks who maybe aren't necessarily familiar with how Zoom works. So we'll definitely go over that again in a minute. But for now, Andy, I'm going to go ahead and stop talking and send it over to you. So if you want to share your screen whenever you're ready to do so. And that looks good. You should be good to go.
There we go. I had to get myself unmuted. So thank you, Jennifer. My name is Andy Drury, and I am the lead permit engineer for the Michigan Potash Operating LLC air permit application. And I worked with a team of air quality staff here at Eagle to review the application. And before we get into the details of Michigan Potash's proposal, I'd like to briefly talk about what the Air Quality Division does and how the permitting process works. So we all know that pollution comes from many different sources, such as big farms, fuel burning vehicles, and various industrial sources. And the overall mission of the Air Quality Division is to protect public health and the environment. And we provide this protection by using our authority under state and federal laws through the regulation of industrial sources. There we go. My slide wouldn't advance. All right, so AQD staff do many different things. For example, we monitor levels of air pollution. We look at different toxics to make sure public health is protected. We conduct inspections of regulated facilities. And we review applications and write permits for sources of air pollutants, like Michigan Potash's proposed facility that we're talking about tonight, to make sure these sources comply with the air quality rules and regulations that are in place to protect public health. So the Air Quality Division has authority to permit sources of air pollutants. However, I want to point out a few items the draft permit does not cover and that we do not have the ability to regulate. These include zoning, where a facility chooses to locate, noise, and traffic on public roads. You'll want to talk to your local government if you have questions or concerns about these issues. Also note, approval of this air permit, either as proposed or with changes based on the public comments we receive, does not mean Michigan Potash has all the permissions needed to begin construction and to operate at the site. Local and other state approvals may be required. By law, the AQD must only evaluate the proposal under the state and federal air quality rules and regulations. This includes specific timeframes that we have to follow when making a decision on an air permit application. In addition, we cannot determine whether a salt and potash production facility is needed when reviewing this air permit application. I'd like to give you a simple overview of the air permitting process. First, the company decides they want to install, modify, or construct a source of air emissions, like Michigan Potash's proposed facility. Then the company submits a permit application. The application is reviewed by an engineer like me. The engineer reviews the information from the company to decide if the proposed process can meet the state and federal air quality regulations. If it appears to meet these rules and regulations, the engineer creates a proposed draft permit. Once the proposed draft permit is approved by the AQD inspector, it's sent to the company for review. If public comment is required, as in this case, the proposed draft permit is posted for public comment. And public comment is a very important part of the permitting process. Once the comment period ends, we evaluate all of the comments. The comments can lead to changes in the proposed permit and in the proposed final decision. Finally, a decision is made on the permit application. This decision may be to approve the permit as written, approve the permit with changes, or to deny the permit. This decision is based on the ability of the company's proposal to meet the air quality regulations. We cannot base our decision on the need for the proposed project or the popularity of the proposal. So Michigan Potash is requesting an air permit to install, called a PTI, for a new salt and potash production facility near Schofield Road and 120th Avenue in Everett Township. So some of you may wonder what potash is. Potash is potassium chloride. Potash is often mined with other minerals such as salt. A primary use of potash is as fertilizer for food production. According to Michigan Potash, fertilizer is the intended use of the potash they would produce. So before we get into the details of the proposed permit for Michigan Potash, I want to talk about the purpose of a permit. So the air permit has to be obtained before the company can start construction. This way, we know that what the company wants to build can meet the air quality regulations. Air permits have conditions or rules companies are required to follow. These conditions make sure the company will meet the air quality rules and regulations that protect public health. The conditions have emission limits on how the process operates, including air pollution control devices, monitoring and record keeping requirements, and testing of air emissions. We'll talk about the proposed Michigan potash permit conditions a little bit later. So when reviewing a proposed project, like the Michigan potash facility, we look at a number of different things. Based on the proposed level of emissions and the proposed equipment, we determine what type of technical review is needed, including which rules and regulations apply. When doing this, we use worst case assumptions. We evaluate the proposed criteria pollutant emissions to ensure they meet the health-based standards set by the federal government. We evaluate the proposed toxic air contaminant emissions to ensure they meet the AQD health screening levels. And we make sure there are air pollution control devices to limit the emissions so the state and federal requirements are met. So let's talk about the state and federal health standards. So we have the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, or NAAQS, and these are health-based levels set by the federal government. And ambient air means outdoor air. So these are standards for outdoor air, the air that the general public breathes. The pollutants listed here on this slide are called criteria pollutants, and there are air quality standards for them. There are other criteria pollutants as well, but Michigan potash will either not emit them or the emissions will be very low, so they're not listed here. And during the application review, we decided that emissions of particulate matter, PM10 and PM2.5, and the nitrogen oxides required computer dispersion modeling to make sure the emissions meet the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. Modeling uses the proposed emissions, information about the proposed buildings, and local weather data to determine if the emissions will meet the standards. The computer model we use is from the US EPA. And as Jen said, Stephanie can answer questions about modeling later. Michigan Potash also chose to do modeling for sulfur dioxide, and modeling was not required for carbon monoxide. The National Ambient Air Quality Standards are developed from research studies and are designed to protect against public health problems like heart and lung problems, learning problems, and premature death. They're also designed to protect sensitive groups like people with heart or lung problems. Based on the modeling results, the proposed emissions will not cause violations of these standards. In addition, Michigan has health-based screening levels for other pollutants called toxic air contaminants, or TACs. The pollutant air impacts based on computer modeling are compared to the AQD's health-based screening levels. The screening levels are designed to protect against health problems like developing cancer or breathing problems. For Michigan potash, the proposed emissions will not violate the health-based screening levels. Some of the pollutants we reviewed are hydrogen sulfide and formaldehyde. So let's go into a summary of Michigan Potash's proposed facility. And in the summary, I will only talk about the processes that will have air emissions. So the salt and potash production process starts with extracting the salt and potash from underground using heated water and brine. Brine is concentrated salt water. The brine from underground may contain hydrogen sulfide. So the first step that will have air emissions would be air stripping. So let's look at this process a little closer. So brine containing salt, potash, and potentially hydrogen sulfide would come from the production wells to air stripping columns. Hydrogen sulfide is a gas and prefers to be in the air rather than the water. So in air stripping, the hydrogen sulfide would transfer from the brine into the air. Air with hydrogen sulfide in it could go to a thermal oxidizer if the hydrogen sulfide concentration is high enough. In the oxidizer, most of the hydrogen sulfide would be burned and would convert to sulfur dioxide. Air from the oxidizer, with sulfur dioxide and leftover hydrogen sulfide in it, would go to a caustic scrubber. In the scrubber, water containing caustic would remove most of the hydrogen sulfide and some of the sulfur dioxide from the air. If the oxidizer is not needed, air with hydrogen sulfide in it from air stripping would go straight to the scrubber. Air from the scrubber with leftover hydrogen sulfide and sulfur dioxide in it would be released to the ambient air. Brine with the salt and potash would go for further processing. And the next major step that would have air emissions is the drying process. The salt and potash would be separated and then dried in two dryers heated with natural gas. So let's take a closer look. The brine with the salt and potash would go to an evaporation and crystallization process to separate the salt from the potash. This process does not have air emissions. The salt would go to the salt dryer. Natural gas would be used to heat air to dry the salt. Burning natural gas produces air emissions, but our main focus is the particulate emissions from the dryer. Air, combustion emissions, and particulate, which is mostly salt, would go to a cyclone and wet scrubber to control the particulate emissions. The cyclone would remove large particles from the air, and the wet scrubber would use water to remove smaller particles. Air, combustion emissions, and the leftover particulate would be released to the ambient air. The dried salt would go for further processing. Similarly, the potash would go to the potash dryer, which is also heated using natural gas. Air, combustion emissions, and particulate, which is mostly potash, would go to a cyclone and wet scrubber to control the particulate emissions. Air, combustion emissions, and leftover particulate would be released to the ambient air. The dried potash would go for further processing. The last major step when they have air emissions is the product processing and packaging. The dried salt and potash would be sent to separate areas to be processed into final products. So let's take a look at this. So the dried salt would be cooled and compacted into the final products. Cooling and compaction would be done inside a building. Some of the salt would be packaged in bagging systems in the building and loaded on trucks. Particulate emissions from these processes would be collected and go to a cyclone and baghouse to control the emissions. The baghouse is basically a large air filter. Air with leftover particulate would be released to the ambient air. The salt product that is not packaged would be sent for bulk storage and loadout in a separate enclosed building. Similarly, the dried potash would be cooled and compacted into the final products inside a building. Particulate emissions from these processes would go to a cyclone and baghouse to control the emissions. Air with leftover particulate would be released into the ambient air, and the potash product would be sent for bulk storage and loadout in a separate enclosed building. Michigan Potash is also proposing support equipment for the facility that would have air emissions. This includes 2 natural gas-fired boilers, a diesel emergency generator, a diesel emergency fire pump, a cooling tower, space heaters, and storage tanks. This equipment was included in the review and is addressed in the proposed permit. So let's talk about the proposed permit. The proposed draft conditions for Michigan Potash have requirements to make sure the air emissions comply with the rules and regulations. This includes the proper operation of the air pollution control equipment, including the scrubbers, thermal oxidizer, and dust collectors. There are annual emission limits to restrict the total facility emissions, as well as hourly emission limits for most of the equipment. There are operating limits, including a limit on the amount of hydrogen sulfide allowed in the brine coming to the facility, and limits on the hours of operation of the emergency engines, monitoring of pollution control device parameters, monitoring of the hydrogen sulfide concentration in the brine coming to the facility, and monitoring of the hydrogen sulfide emissions from the air stripping system. There are records required to show compliance with permit requirements and compliance testing, with most of the emission limits being verified by stack testing. The proposed permit requires stack testing of the particulate matter emissions from the dryers and the cooling and compaction processes. Stack testing is also required for the hydrogen sulfide and sulfur dioxide emissions from the air stripping process. I can answer questions about the proposed project and permit conditions, but first, I want to have Karen, the area inspector, talk a little bit about the inspection process for a facility like that proposed by Michigan Potash.
Thanks, Andy. Hello, everyone. My name is Karen Owens, and I'm out of the Cadillac District Office, and I would be the inspector for this proposed facility. There are a number of ways inspectors check compliance. One is by inspection, which are usually unannounced. When we conduct an inspection, we are on site at the facility looking at everything related to the permit, state, and federal regulations. This means physically looking at the operation of the equipment, including the stacks and control devices, and thoroughly reviewing the records that are required by the permit. New sources are typically inspected within the first year of startup and then inspected on a regular basis thereafter. Additionally, the source will submit annual air emissions through the Michigan Air Emissions Reporting System, also known as MERS, which in this case are reviewed by me. I may also conduct an additional inspection in response to complaints. A complaint investigation is similar to an inspection, typically focusing on the area of the plant which might be associated with a complaint. After we conduct an inspection, we write a report, and once the report is finalized, it is posted to Eagle's website and is available to the public. I'm going to pass it back to Jen to bring us to the question and answer portion of the night. Thank you.
There I go. Mine wouldn't let me unmute, so it obviously didn't want me to keep talking here. So thanks to Andy and to Karen for that. Personally, I just have to say this, Andy, I really love those flow diagrams, and I apologize to folks on the phone. I think you did a nice job walking us through that, but if folks on the phone do want to see what those flow diagrams look like, just to let you know, it was pretty much arrows and boxes just kind of highlighting what Andy was talking about when he was talking through the process. But I think that what we'll do is we'll go ahead and post those online. And like I said earlier, if you guys want to email Andy, he can share those with you as well. And we'll give his email address out here in just a minute. So we're going to enter into our Q&A portion of the night right now. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen over yours so we can remind folks how to ask a question if they do have questions. Maybe I'll do that. And I'll have my panelists introduce my panelists again, but I just want to go over one more time how you can ask a question. So use that comment box or that question and answer box at the bottom of your screen if you want to go ahead and type in a question there. You can also use that raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen if you would like to verbalize a question, and then just keep that in mind if you want to make a comment. Folks on the phone, as a reminder for you, your raise hand icon is basically the #2 that you have. So if you would like to ask a question, you can feel free to do that. So again, just want to reintroduce my panelists. You just heard from Andy. Again, Andy's the engineer for this proposed project. So he did a lot of the review and worked with our other air staff that you just met Karen Owens. Like she said, if this facility does end up getting built, she would be the inspector. Stephanie Hangsbaugh is our air modeler. I think Andy talked about her when he was talking about the National Ambient Air Quality Standards and how she helps look at those. Mike Deppa, he's our toxicologist that worked on this facility. Amy Robinson, when we pull in air monitoring, it's not necessarily that our air monitoring staff help us work on the proposed permit, but they often can answer questions about what the outdoor air quality is and how those air monitors, those stationary monitors work throughout the state and what the closest ones are to the proposed facilities. Like I said, we've got Mark Snow from our Oil, Gas, and Minerals division, and I think I called you Office of, and I apologize because I know you guys have changed. And then James Milne from our Water Resources division to answer questions for you tonight. So without further ado, I'll just go ahead, and I don't want to go there yet, so I apologize. I want to just make sure I leave you guys ample time to ask questions if you would like to, especially folks on the phone. And just if you are on the phone, what usually works best, just to let you know, is I will call out the last 4 digits of your phone number so you know that I'm talking to you. So I know for me, sometimes with my family, I get confused who has what number. And so just make sure you know which number it is that you're calling from tonight for us. So we don't have any questions yet, but I just want to give you guys another minute here. So I'm going to let you sit in some awkward silence, and I'll try desperately not to fill it with conversation, which is what I usually do. Let's give folks a couple more minutes here. I don't want to start our hearing too early if we do have some questions about this proposal. And just as a reminder, and I know I said I wasn't going to fill, but I forgot I wanted to just mention again that our hearing portion of the night, once we get to that portion, we won't be responding to any of your comments. All right. So while we're waiting just to see if anybody has questions, I'll go ahead and give out Andy's email address once now, and I'll give it out again later as well. But his email address is actually really easy. It's his last name, which is Drury. That's D as in dog, R as in Ralph, U as in umbrella, R as in Ralph, and Y as in yellow. And the letter of his first name, which is A, so Drury A at Michigan, all spelled out, .gov as in government. And yes, this is a great question. So will the PDFs that be posted, will the PDFs that were on the slides be posted? Yes, whatever we show on the slides here, we will definitely post. We'll post them as a PDF. They won't be posted as a PowerPoint presentation, but they will be posted as a PDF. So even though it won't be animated like Andy's was, you'll still be able to see all of those same flow diagrams and all of that. So that's a great question. And we will post those on our open for comment website, which is at michigan.gov. And then it's just /Eagle Air Public Notice. Sorry, my brain just went a weird way. So I'm going to repeat that, michigan.gov/Eagle Air Public Notice. So then you'll see the open for comment page, and then you'll see all of the information that we have associated with this facility in particular. And that webpage is actually really cool as well, because it has any other air quality related items that are open for comment all kind of in one place. So you'll be able to find our open permits. If we have rules that are open for comment, anything that we really have open for comment, we post through that webpage. So it's a pretty easy all access page for folks. All right. Well, panelists, I think you might have got off the hook a little bit easy tonight. So if folks have questions, if you want to go ahead and email Andy, and like I said, if we I'll show a slide that has everyone's contact information at the end of the evening tonight. So if you wanted to contact somebody else and you're not phoning in, but otherwise, if you want to just give Andy an email, or we'll give his phone number out in a little bit, and then he can always get you to the right person. So, all righty. Well, panelists, if you guys want to go ahead and you can turn your cameras off, and I'm going to have Marianne go ahead and turn hers on, because as the decision maker for the evening tonight, we need to make sure she's listening. There she is. I was like, we can't see your face. You disappeared. How'd you do that? I didn't know that was a Zoom option. All right. So, okay. So the public hearing portion, remember, just to reiterate, this is not a time when we'll be able to respond back to your comments. I do have a very sort of dry statement that I do need to read to you all to officially open the hearing portion. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And then once that's done, I will start calling on folks. Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the public hearing portion of the evening. Like I said earlier, my name is Jennifer Dixon, and I'm with the Environmental Support Division of the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. And I will be your hearing officer tonight. Marianne Dolahanty, Division Director for the Air Quality Division, is the decision maker for this permit application and will be listening in on the hearing tonight as well. This hearing is in regard to a draft permit to install for the proposed construction and operation of a facility to produce salt and potash for the Michigan Potash Operating LLC, hereinafter Michigan Potash, and their request to locate in Osceola County, Michigan. The Air Quality Division is responsible for regulating sources of air pollutants to minimize adverse impacts to public health and the environment. The law governing those responsibilities is Part 55 of the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act. The purpose of tonight's hearing is to give anyone interested in the proposed air permit an opportunity to provide information the department may use when deciding whether to approve the permit to install, or if there are additional issues to consider. Please note the proposed air permit is still a draft permit. This does not mean the department has already made a decision. Instead, it reflects an initial technical review of the proposal submitted by Michigan Potash. We hope that having the details of the draft permit available will help you in providing your comments. Everything in the draft permit remains open for comment and further consideration by the department, including whether the permit will be granted at all. Please recognize the department can only use the information you provide if it relates to the criteria we must use in making a decision. So for example, concerns related to local zoning, truck traffic, and noise are not within our authority. Some of you may want to simply express your support or opposition to the proposed project. We're happy to make note of your position, but please understand the department is by law not allowed to base our decision on whether there is widespread support or opposition to the proposed air permit. This hearing is being recorded, and your comments will be part of the information the department will use to make its decision on the proposed air permit. The public comment period for the proposed permit began on September 2nd, 2021, and will end at midnight on October 18, 2021. Additional information and comments may be submitted through that time. After the close of the public comment period, the decision maker will review all comments received before making a final decision. The decision maker may deny the permit, approve as drafted, or approve with amendments. If approved, the decision must specify which provisions of the draft permit, if any, have been changed in the final permit and the reasons for the change. In all three of these scenarios, approval with changes, or denial All interested parties, including everyone who was on the original mailing list, anyone who provided comments during the public comment period, and anyone who attended the public meetings and hearings will be directly notified of the decision. This notification will include a letter from the decision maker regarding the decision and, if applicable, the approved permit. The decision will also be posted on our webpage and sent out through our Eagle electronic notification system. This is not your only opportunity to submit a comment. You may submit a comment via voicemail, email, or US mail at any time before October 18 at midnight. I will provide specific information on how to do that later this evening. If you would like to make a comment tonight, there are 2 ways to do so. You may do so in writing by typing the word comment into the question box and then writing your comment. I will read all comments aloud via the question box unless you state do not read. If you would like to make a verbal comment, you may raise your hand and I will unmute your line so you can speak. We will limit your comment time to 3 minutes. If you are speaking, I'll let you know when you have about 30 seconds left and I'll do my best to address commenters in the order your hands were raised, but please bear with us as the technology does have limitations with that. Please recognize department staff are here tonight to promote a fair opportunity for you to express your views on the proposed air permit and to listen to your comments. Thank you so much for your attention. I will now begin calling the names of those who have indicated they would like to make a statement. All right. All right, Mr. Lipstrew, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you so that you can. Okay, you should be able to unmute your line and go ahead and try speaking. There you go.
Can you hear me all right?
Yep, you sound great. So if you don't mind just stating your name and any affiliation you may have before you start making your comment, I would really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to provide a brief support testimony at this hearing. My name is Chuck Lipstrew. I serve as president of the Michigan Agribusiness Association located in Lansing, Michigan. Pleased to join everyone tonight to offer testimony in support of the application. I strongly agree that the proposed permit is written in a way that prioritizes both public health and environmental stewardship. I'd like to outline 3 very basic comments regarding my support for this application and for the overall project. First, in my position as leader of an agricultural business association, I have continually been impressed by the professionalism and the deep expertise of the Michigan Potash and Salt Company team, and the priority the company places on open communication, transparency, diligence, and engagement with the local community where it is seeking to advance this project. I think it's very important that the company brings deep industry experience, a cumulative close to 300 years of experience in the area of development of this kind. And I think that's demonstrated by the very thorough and complete application that's before us tonight. Second, I'm very pleased to note that Michigan Potash is collaborating with Barton Malow, the largest trade employer in Michigan, along with multiple local building trades unions. That's very important. It demonstrates that Michigan Potash wants to work with people who are the very best at what they do, delivering peace of mind that the work involved in this project, should it move ahead, will be done the right way, the safe way, and in a way that safeguards our air, land, and water. And finally, third and finally, I just want to make a note from the perspective of the Michigan Agribusiness Association. Our commitment to the future of agriculture goes hand in glove with our commitment to economic prosperity in our small towns and rural communities. This proposal is a sterling example of rural economic development done the right way. It will deliver, if it moves ahead, more than 300 good paying construction jobs, again, through local building trades unions over the course of 3 years, create more than 150 full-time operations positions, and pump more than $1 billion in economic benefits into the region, and benefit our state's agriculture sector and rural economy overall. So this is precisely the type of investment we, from the perspective of the Michigan Agribusiness Association, want to see in Michigan's small towns and rural communities. It's well planned, as we see in the permit before us at this public hearing, and a well-executed project like the one that's been proposed, that's led by experienced professionals, experienced tradespeople, is the right way to pursue rural economic development. So I'm here to wholeheartedly support this application, and I encourage its approval. Thanks for the opportunity to join you this evening.
Thank you so much for your comment, Mr. Lipstrew. We greatly appreciate you being here tonight too. Okay. We have plenty of time for anyone else who would like to make a comment tonight. I'm just going to wait for hands. Remember, if you're on the phone and you'd like to make a comment, you just need to click #2. That is your raise hand icon. Just give you guys a few more minutes just in case anyone else would like to make a comment. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. A couple more things to go over. I do have to read an official statement to close out the hearing. It's very short, not nearly as long as the one to open it, just to let you know. Okay, so just to officially close the hearing for tonight, thank you so much for taking the time to participate in this hearing tonight. We appreciate your interest in protecting Michigan's air quality. As indicated at the beginning of the hearing, the public comment period will close at midnight on October 18th, 2021. All interested parties, anyone who provided comments during the public comment period, and anyone who attended this public hearing will be directly notified of the final decision on this proposed permit. The hearing is now closed. Thank you again for your participation. So just a couple things to go over before we close out the evening tonight. I just want to make sure that folks know other ways that you can still make comments, like I said, until October 18th at midnight. So if you want to send those in via mail, Marianne didn't say this, but I know she's mentioned it in the past. We'll take any kind of writing. If you want to put it on a Post-it note or postcard and stick it in the mail, send it to Annette Switzer. She is our permit section manager here at Eagle. So the address there, if you folks on the phone need to write this down, is P.O. Box 30260. And that's in Lansing, Michigan. The zip code for that is 48909. You can also send us an email at eagle-aqd-pti public comments at michigan.gov. So that's eagle, E-G-L-E, dash A as in apple, Q as in queen, D as in dog, dash P as in Paul, T as in Tom, I as in igloo, and then the word public comments. So it's PTI public comments, all one word, at Michigan, all spelled out, .gov as in government. But the easiest way, I think personally, is to just give us a call and leave your comment on our voicemail box. And that phone number is 517-284-0900. All right. And I know I promised to tell you where you could find more information. So what you can find about this particular project on our open for comment page is a proposed project summary. So oftentimes we find folks come to hearings and they don't have a lot of background information about what's going on with the proposal. Maybe their neighbor said, hey, you should come to this hearing. It's going to be important. It's in our community. So the proposed project summary is a high level piece of information that kind of lays out what Andy talked about tonight, but in a little bit different way. There's also the technical fact sheet, which goes through a very technical review of the rules, the regulations, what Michigan Potash has asked us for, what they would like to be able to install, and then how we reviewed that as compared with our standards and rules that Andy went over tonight. You can also look at the proposed permit terms and conditions. That can be a little bit confusing. So if you're not used to it, please feel free to reach out to Andy or one of our other staff. They can kind of walk you through what exactly that means. You'll be able to find links to the recording for this meeting as soon as it's done. And then we'll also post these slides up too, just because we had quite a few folks that were calling in with us tonight. Again, that website is michigan.gov/Eagle Air Public Notice. So you can definitely find out this information there if you would like to do that. So right now on the screen, what I have is all of our panelists for tonight. So I'm going to just verbalize Andy's contact information again for folks on the phone if they want to write this down. But anybody else, if there's a certain person that you want to just have a one-on-one conversation with, please feel free to reach out to them via email or on the phone. Their contact information is up on the screen right now. So if you want to get a hold of Andy, it's drurya@michigan.gov. So again, his last name is D as in dog. I should say R as in red. I don't know why I said Ralph earlier. So D as in dog, R as in red, U as in umbrella, R as in red, Y as in yellow, and then the letter A as in apple. So drurya@michigan.gov. And his direct line is 517-648-6663. Another number I want to mention that is up on the line right now, on the screen, is our pollution emergency number. So if you are experiencing a pollution emergency and it's not something that you can do during regular business hours, where maybe you contact Karen to talk with her about a complaint that you have about a facility in that area, you can give our pollution emergency number a call, and that number is 800-292-4706. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close out the meeting tonight. So we do really, really appreciate everybody taking the time out of their night tonight. I know it's not very nice down here, but it's still a pretty nice fall day, and I would definitely probably prefer being outside and taking a little walk rather than being on the screen. So I appreciate you all being with us tonight. Thank you again for my panelists. Sorry, most of you didn't get to chat with us tonight, but maybe the next time we have another meeting, we'll be able to chat with you then. So thanks everybody, and really appreciate it. Take care, and remember to reach out if you have any other questions or concerns about this proposal.